So, Dan North, thank you very much.
Brilliant. Right. Thank you for that most unusual introduction. See, that's why index cards are only that big, because then you can only fit so much on them. We're going to need to refactor that scenario. Okay, so beyond features. This is a talk I've given a number of times now. It's something that's really dear to my heart, and I try not to get increasingly cross each time I give it, because it becomes increasingly true each time I give it. But it's a meme, it's an idea that I'm trying to get out there, and so I'm going to share it with you guys, and hopefully you'll have some really good questions and you can help me articulate it better. So it's about our obsession with features. So beyond features then, let's go back. Who's not seen the Agile Manifesto? Has anybody not seen yet? Just checking. One person hasn't seen it. Okay, fantastic. So this is, I'm not going to spend long on this. This is the result of a drinking weekend with a bunch of middle-aged white guys in February, beginning of February 2001. It was actually their second attempt. They met the previous year and basically drank and forgot to do any work. And then they said, that was awesome, we should do it again and do something. And this time they came up with the Agile Manifesto, which suggests that sometimes things need to, cogitate for a while. I love this. I think it's a great document. It's the front page of a bigger document. There's like a whole bunch of principles that sit behind this. But essentially it is, and someone else pointed this out about, 18 months ago, and I just had a massive, like when you've stared at something for many years and you see it through a completely different lens. And he said, he said, as a manifesto, he said, that's not actually a list of values. I said, what do you mean? And he said, that's not a list of values. There's the Agile values, that's not a list of values, it's a list of examples of values. I was like, oh yeah. There's nothing on there that says do this, it says here are some examples of things we value. We've come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, and I'm the examples guy. And I'm going, oh, idiot, didn't spot that. So I was very excited to realize that this was examples all along. And then, but that made me a sad panda. And the thing that made me a sad panda is this, is you said, we have come to value, and this is the second sentence in this manifesto. The opening sentence says, we are continuing to learn. It's gorgeous. We are continuing to discover new ways of delivering software. Through this, we have come to value these things. Okay, and anyone here not value those things? Reasonably okay, okay? So, and the things on the right, it doesn't say the things on the right are bad. It says, whilst we value the things on the right, we value the things on the left more. We value processes and tools. Processes and tools aren't bad. We just think that individuals and interactions are more important, right? And so then I look around at how we are delivering software, the people in our industry that talk about Agile, that sell Agile, that implement Agile, and I don't see this. And that's what makes me sad. Because it doesn't matter what you say you value. What you say you value isn't interesting. The way you behave is interesting. Right? Your behavior betrays your actual values. It's a projection of your actual values regardless of what your mouth's doing. Okay, so if you say, I love animals, and you kick puppies, you're a puppy kicker, right? There's no two ways about it. You kick puppies, yeah? And so the problem is this. It's what we've come to demonstrate. So we've come to demonstrate processes and tools over individuals and interactions. I put a new team together. Day one, they're all assembled together for the first time, and they say, well, Scrum or Kanban. 2-week or 3-week or 1-week iterations, sprints, right? What are we going to use? Jira, yeah? I saw a thing recently, the top 10 Agile project management tools. The fact that Agile project management isn't a thing apparently escaped them. So Agile project management tools, what's the number one Agile project management tool? No.
Excel.
Yes, it's Excel. Excel is the number one by a big survey of lots of people delivering Agile projects. What do you use to track work? Excel. Second place is Jira. Third place, Microsoft Project. No one comes out of that looking good. Right? right? Jira doesn't want to be nestled between those two. I don't know, anyway. So, but we obsess about the tools, we obsess about the metrics, we obsess about the process, and oh yeah, there's a bunch of people who want to deliver some work. Oh, we'll come to them later, right? And then what happens? Well, then mea culpa. Then we get into specification by example. We get into executable specification. We get into behavior-driven development. We get into scenarios and Cucumber and Gherkin and all this stuff. All these executable tests are documentation, right? They don't run your app. They aren't your app. They describe your app. Or sometimes they don't. They describe one of many almost identical scenarios that are nothing to do with your app, but someone thought they should write them. Okay, or they have a tool that generates these things, right? But we obsess about, like we've built a religion around test automation. Test automation is not software delivery. Okay, test automation, well, I was going to say at best, in its most common form, test automation is a cult about more tests equals better. Okay, if tests are documentation, more documentation isn't better. Better documentation is better. What's the smallest set of tests that give me confidence about my application? I want those tests. You can get rid of all the other ones. Yeah? So we've gotten into this obsession about documentation over working software. I was working at a bank, and they had, was it one of the developers, lovely Canadian guy. I think that's probably a tautology, isn't it? I don't know any not lovely Canadians. Lovely Canadian guy, and he's writing this app, and this app was in Python. And I'm going to describe to you what this Python function does, and you've got to try and imagine the code. What it does, it takes a string, and it returns a 3-letter code. And the 3-letter code is an ISO currency code, so like GBP for pounds or whatever. And the way it works is this. If you pass it the letters US, it returns USD. If you pass it any 3 letters, it just returns those 3 letters because it assumes it's a currency code. And anything else, it gives you 3 spaces. Can anybody in the room not visualize that code? Right. There were 99 lettuce, which is cucumber in Python, because garden vegetables, apparently. Right. 99 scenarios describing this 4 lines of code. Right. And I was like, how long did this take? And he said, well, the code took about 4 minutes, and I spent the rest of the week writing these scenarios. I was like, why? And he said something that broke my heart. He said, they made me. Right? I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I never meant it to be this. And so we get really, really hung up on documentation. We happen to call it test, right? And the fact that you slice your massive requirements document into a slice, into a list of slices, and each of those slices you call it a feature, and you put that on a big backlog, doesn't mean you didn't do a massive big batch requirements document, because you did. Right? Using words like stories and features and backlog doesn't get you off the hook. Okay? And then, who's using Scrum or some flavor of Scrum? Okay, about a third of you. Who's using Kanban or some flavor of Kanban? About a quarter of you. Who's using something they made up? I'm with you guys, right? Yeah, so we have sprints or time boxes or iterations or whatever. And the idea is that at the beginning of a sprint, we do sprint planning. And then work happens. And so at the end of that planning, what's the output of that planning? It's fixed scope, says someone confidently. I am a Scrum Master. They will deliver my stuff. We have a lovely thing called a sprint commitment. Yeah, and you go, oh, that's nice. And you get to the end of the sprint, and they say, well, how did you do? And they say, well, we delivered 14 story points or some other made-up number. 14 story points. And you go, okay, that sounds like, it's a pretty good couple of weeks. We've done some really good work. We delivered 14. You committed to 17. I know we've done 14 points, so look, we've done it. You committed to 17. You've let yourselves down. You've let me down. Look at this chart and look at where you are, right? And recently they turned it into a different word, but it's still a contract. And so we do this in the small, we do this in terms of release scope, so we're still negotiating contracts. We haven't learned how to be collaborative yet. And the last one then, following a plan over adapting to change. Who here has more than 30 items currently on a backlog? Yay. Everyone, right, everyone. Let's go with everyone. Show of hands says roughly everyone. Who is fairly confident that no matter how hard they negotiate and how much they plead, none of those items are negotiable? Right? Yeah, quite a lot of you. All right, the top 2/3 are not negotiable. Yeah, because we did Moscow on a backlog, because those two worlds are fine, right? And that makes me sad. And there's a wonderful chap, Peter Drucker, so famous management theorist, change theorist, and he has this wonderful quote, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And so my observation here is this, is methodology eats manifesto for breakfast. Right? As soon as money gets involved, as soon as I can sell certification, doesn't matter about the values, because now I have practices. And it's really hard to fill a 2-day residential class with values. Okay, so we need to learn to do stuff. The first Scrum projects, they didn't have stand-ups and burn up and burn down and backlogs and features, and they didn't have any of that. Martine Devos, one of my favorite people, a crazy Belgian lady, if you ever get a chance to meet her, she's awesome fun to hang out with. So she's working in the public sector in Belgium, in education, and she's, 18-month, 2-year release timelines was fairly normal, and she said to her team, we're going to deliver something in 12 weeks. We're going to deliver something in 3 months, even if it kills us. And I mean, don't be silly, Martine, you can't do anything in 3 months. It takes 6 months to get a server, right? And she said, I know, but we're going to deliver in 12 weeks, and we're not going to fly blind for 12 weeks. We're going to sprint to halfway, 6 weeks, pause, course correct, sprint to the release. So that's where the idea of sprints came from. The first sprints were 6 weeks long. And so what she was saying, let's put this in real terms, what she was saying is we are going to deliver in a season. And that was considered impossible. This is early 90s. And so that was the whole constraint. I want to see something after 6 weeks. I want to release in 12 weeks. It can be tiny, but it has to be non-zero. And so all of that broke all the rules. Yeah. So what happened was people are, if I said, it's 18-month release, we'll try and deliver it in 16 months, you just try a bit harder. You work a bit later and you burn yourselves out and all that stuff. If I say 12 weeks, everything breaks. The fact that you're building a thing that's going to take 8 months to build that feature, Martine's not going to be very happy about that. Right? I have to find a way to slice it so that I have something demonstrable in 6 weeks. It changes how I do things. We do monthly steering. Well, in a 6-week sprint, I'm going to get 2 of those in if I'm lucky. So maybe what about weekly steering? I could get 6 data points. Well, that's cutting it a bit. What if we just did daily steering? So I just invented stand-ups from first principles, right? And same with features. I need a smaller chunk of work. Most of the time it takes to deliver something is handing off. I've got to do my analysis. I hand it off to my architects, and they hand it off to the programmers. Well, we're going to have to get everyone sitting together then, because getting everyone sitting together means we can work faster, we can communicate faster. So all the things that we now just consider like normal practice, they made up in order to meet this crazy constraint of shipping something in 12 weeks. And guess what? They shipped something in 12 weeks, and it was tiny, and it was rubbish, and it was non-zero. And because of that, they went, wow, this is possible. This is pretty cool. And so they did another sprint and another release, and it was much bigger and much better value, etc. And a lot of people around that time were trying similar things. So all these methods then emerged in the 90s. And this is another thing that I do like to call out because it amuses me, is people are still going on newly minted Scrum certification classes for all these kind of things. Like state-of-the-art agile delivery is 20-something years old. Okay, it's over 20 years old. XP is 97. Scrum, depending on who you ask, is 92, 93. Crystal, mid-90s. Adaptive, DSDM, all these methods came out in the early to mid-90s. Okay, and so they all had this thing in common. Oh, who's been in the IT industry? Who's been in our industry for less than 20 years? Nearly all the hands. Agile has always existed. You've never known a time when it wasn't. Who was delivering software in the 90s? Yeah, hurty face. Yeah. You look at the pain in these people's eyes, there's a sadness about it. That's why they invented this stuff. Okay. So agile methods, what are agile methods optimizing for? Then we're developing these methods because we're trying to get something. What are we optimizing for? What's the goal? What's the purpose of agile methods? You can call things out. Changing priority quickly. Quality. Early value delivery. Let's have a look. Yeah, quality. Quality always comes up soon. I like quality. What else have we got? Feedback. Yeah. It's great because you can just go through the XP values and all up there. Communication, very important. Collaboration, transparency, all these things are very important in terms of time to market, predictability. What else we've got? Learning. We're optimizing for learning. That sounds like a nice thing to say, doesn't it? We're a learning organization. We're optimizing. Change, simplicity, flexibility. These are all things that are probably pretty good to optimize for. Business value. There it is. Anyone know what business value is? Anybody give me a half-decent definition of business value?
Return on investment.
Return on investment, profit, maybe. It's a pretty blunt instrument. Something higher up.
Customer satisfaction.
Something someone higher up wants. Yes, Hippo, highest paid person's opinion. Yeah. Right, so I'm going to play a game, okay? One of the things on there is the thing that agile methods were all designed around, right? They're all optimizing for. So we're going to play a mind game now. You're going to stare at the thing you think it is, okay? Stare really hard at the thing you think it is. Lock it on pin it to the screen. Okay, now let's see. Oh, he said quality. Shame. Oh, no, there it goes. Oh. So, sorry, simplicity. Collaboration's gone. Oh, communication, no. Oh, there it is. There it is. Predictability. Agile methods are optimizing for predictability. Think of how much of your working week you spend doing work that's only goal is to increase my sense of predictability. I've got release planning, I've got sprint planning, I've got estimation and story points and planning poker. None of these are work. None of these are value-adding delivery work. Right? These are just stuff I do. Velocity, burn up, burn down. Oh, we love all them. What else? Yesterday's weather, sprint commitments, backlog grooming. But it's not sprint commitments. Now it's sprint forecasts, because apparently that's better. Right? So now we say commitments is too hard of a word. It's a forecast. So, okay, you forecast 17 points and you delivered 14. You've let yourself down. It doesn't really change anything, but, you know. So, yeah. So here's the thing. We developed software engineering based on civil engineering. So software engineering, who here has a parent in IT? Look around the room. I love this because every year there's a couple more hands, right? There's two, right. Practically no one in this room. We are making this up. Okay? We are making up software, right? How software works. Most of the people in this room have a job title that didn't exist 10 years ago. Fact, right? If this were a healthcare meetup, right? How many people have got a parent in healthcare? Half of you. There's an education meetup. Who's got a parent who's a teacher? Half of you. Yeah. IT? No one. Making it up on a framework that's existed for less time than my hamster, right? I don't even have a hamster. So what you do when you're making stuff up, if you're a relatively smart human being, is you model based on metaphor. So you look at things that are like the thing you're doing, and you steal that. So when we first started doing medicine, we thought it was magic because we had magic, we had superstition, and so superstition on people became medicine. That's how we used to fix people. Luckily we got better at it. But so at the time, in the 50s and 60s, the discipline that we saw that we wanted to emulate, aspire to, was civil engineering. Civil engineering is proper roads and houses and buildings and stuff, right? These guys know what they're doing. Civil engineering front loads the risk, right? The way I build a hospital is I front load the risk. So what I do is this, is I get an architect and the architect designs my overall structure. So I'm building a hospital and they say we're going to put these buildings here and the wards over here and the car park here. And I draw out this thing, and there's usually some vanity stuff in there as well because it's going to be an awesome hospital, right? And then what I do, then I show it to a structural engineer. I say, what do you think of this hospital? And he says, well, that structure won't hold its own weight, and you've put the car park the other side of the building from the A&E entrance, so I'm not sure what you're going to do with the ambulances. It's like, oh, good catch, right? But that's easy. I can rub it out. It's cheap to fix that. It's just on paper or on a screen. So engineer assesses makes sure that the overall structure is going to make sense. Then what do? Then I get a quantity surveyor to estimate. Okay, they say how many materials and all that kind of stuff, and then I get a project manager because is this sounding familiar? Right. I'm going to get a project manager because I need to line up a whole bunch of time-critical things. If the ballast arrives too early, if the sand arrives too soon, I've got a massive storage problem. If I order too much of this stuff, I've sunk some costs that I didn't need to sink. If the stuff arrives too late, I've got a delay cost because I've got a bunch of engineers or a bunch of builders standing around with nothing to do. So understanding critical path, understanding scheduling and time boxes, and John Gant, who was a great civil engineer, invented a particular type of modeling, right? Makes sense. All that makes sense. And so that's what we do. Engineering, the fact that we're doing civil engineering, that suggests that bigger is better, okay? More engineering is better. Wider roads, we love wide roads, right? Wider roads are better, I can get more traffic on them, they can take more capacity. Longer bridges are better, right? It means I can cover bigger spans. The Golden Gate Bridge, when it was designed, was like completely insane. There's no way you could build something that size that could take that much load, and they did. Bigger houses are better, unless you're downsizing, right? I'm in the middle of moving house right now, and it's very exciting. My new house has more en-suites than I have bedrooms. I'm just going to have a shower in a different room every day until I get bored with that. It's very exciting. Fancier hospitals that can do more stuff, that have more state-of-the-art equipment are better, right? It means I can cure more people, I can deal with higher throughput, all that kind of stuff. And so what if we're wrong? What if that's the wrong goal? What if it's the wrong metaphor? What if it's been a 50-year accidental detour, right? So then what I want to do is go back a bit and ask, what's the goal of software delivery? What's the point of building software? Sorry? Deliver a product. Solve a customer need. Do the least amount possible to prove a theory. These are some very good answers. Solve a problem. I've been thinking about this, and this was the not very pithy phrase I came up with. Sustainably minimize lead time to business impact. There's lots of words in there. Don't worry, I'm going to unpack them. Okay. Sustainably minimize lead time to business impact. What's business impact? Business impact is a measurable dial moving in the business. So it's increased customer retention, it's increased customer spend, it's reduced churn, it's faster time to market, it's less time on the phone handling a complaint, right? It's some business metric. It could be an OpEx metric, it could be that it's cheaper to run my data center, that's a business metric, okay? But there is some dial that I chose somewhere in the organization, an organizational KPI, and we impacted it. I prefer business impact as a phrase to business value because you can have, ideally, positive business impact, because otherwise it's bad, yeah? So positive business impact. Lead time. What do I mean by lead time? Concept to cash. I had a discussion with Mary Poppendick recently, who came up with the phrase concept to cash, and I disagreed with her, and she agreed with me disagreeing with her, so I'm very happy about that, because she's way smarter than me. And so we were talking about, so concept to cash is the idea of like, as soon as I have a perceived need, the clock starts until I meet that need. Which is true, but I've got loads of needs, and I just get on with things. So really the thing I care about in terms of lead time is from when I commit to meeting that need. So I've started using the phrase commitment to cash, because what that does is it decouples. I want you to tell me all the things you need. I don't want to stop that influx of good ideas, but what I don't want is to have the assumption that when you say, oh, I really need this thing, there's an assumed contract that I'm now on the hook for it, because there's loads of other things I can be doing as well. So from commitment to cash is lead time. The clock starts ticking. I'm going to solve this thing for you. If you've got a need, I'm going to hopefully meet that need. Now you're allowed to start the clock. You start the clock, and from this point, she doesn't care if I'm having stand-ups or measuring time in gummy bears or doing any of that. She doesn't care. All she cares about is the clock's ticking and I haven't met a need yet. And at some point, I go, oh, here, I made you a thing. And she says, what did she say when I give her a thing?
More things.
She says, oh, no, she says, I want more things. No, she says, thank you. That's what she says. Then she says, I want more things. No. She says, thank you. So really, lead time is the wall clock time from I am going to meet your need to thank you. Sorry, you can have more things, don't worry. So now it turns out you can minimize lead time to business impact really easily once. You might get away with it twice. After that, you've either burnt everyone out or they've quit. Okay? So really, the important thing is sustainably. That's the hard one. If you can build a delivery organization, a delivery operation that can sustainably minimize lead time to business impact, then you're on a winner. Okay? You'll notice the word software isn't in there anywhere. It's nothing to do with software. Software is a tool in my back pocket for achieving business impact. If I can achieve business impact with no software, I win at software. Okay. So another way to think about this is sustainably minimize lead time to results, to some kind of outcome. And so then we can think about the difference between outcome metrics and output metrics. So outcome metrics is, did I solve the problem? Did I meet the need? Did I achieve business impact? Output metrics is, how's the system working? That's like system health type things. So I can measure output metrics, I can measure system metrics and make sure the system's healthy and happy, which is a proxy for outcome metrics. Because usually the outcome metrics are distant enough in time that they're not that useful. So if I can massively shorten batch size, massively shorten lead time, I can start using outcome metrics to tune my system. And that's when it gets interesting. And so this got me thinking. This got me thinking about metaphors and things we could do and all this kind of stuff. And it occurred to me that maybe software is more like surgery. Maybe surgery would be a better metaphor for software than civil engineering. And the thing that got me thinking this was this. No one wants surgery. No one wants software. No one says, oh, I'd love some software, please. Right? They don't want surgery. People say things like, if I must have surgery, if I have to have surgery, then what I want is the minimum possible amount of surgery. Okay? So, I go to the surgeon, I say, well, I've got this pain here, and he says, oh, that's a hernia, sunshine, you're middle-aged. I was like, oh, okay. So he says, well, I've got a couple of options. One is I can just go in and do this tiny little thing like that. And the other is I can cut you open and do all I want. I'm paying for surgery. I want lots of surgery. I want all the... I said no one ever, right? No. I don't want lots of really badly invasive surgery. No, I don't want that. I want competent, experienced professionals providing that surgery. Okay? I want to be operated on by people who've operated on other people. I don't want to be experimental. Yeah. It's like, oh, we've got this great idea. I don't know if it's going to work, but stop. Right?
I've actually been there on a hospital on a Sunday.
Yep.
And the junior wanted to stick the knife in. And I could hear the phone calls going with a consultant somewhere. And I had to say, no, this is not what we're looking for. The minimum. Let's wait until the next day, the Monday.
So just for the folks watching at home. So saying we're in a hospital, and there was a junior surgeon who said, oh, I got this. And they said, hang on a minute, and I'd rather wait till Sunday. And this is the thing, is when I'm going in for surgery, unless it's life-threatening, I would rather wait until I can get someone who is experienced. I will also pay as much as I can afford for the best surgery I can get. Okay, for the best outcome I can get. That's typically how most of us consume surgery. That's how most of us think about surgery. The surgical model is what they call see one, do one, teach one. So see one, do one, teach one is you watch, you observe. That's why you have all these junior doctors tropping around like this and watching, gathered around operating theatres. Do one is you're operating under the close supervision of someone who's also got a scalpel and is ready to elbow you out the way at a moment's notice. And then once you've done many, you now start teaching, and the cycle goes on. So it's actually see hundreds, do hundreds, teach some, right? But it's called see one, do one, teach one is the model. And this model has been working for centuries, right? Quite a lot of centuries. So I want competent, experienced professionals, okay? I want people using established, proven techniques. Otherwise it doesn't really work, does it? So yeah, we've got this, we're not really sure what this thing's connected to, but we don't think it's entirely necessary. So we're just going to leave it. No, put it back. I don't know what it does either, but put it back, right? So established, proven techniques, and there's a kind of funny flip side here. If something unexpected happens, I want them not to go, ah! That's the wrong noise to hear from a surgeon, yeah? So I want them to go, oh, okay, this is unusual. People unusually have one spleen, but, while we're in here. So, if they're going to see something weird, right, they're not going to go, they're going to go, okay, so biologically, what's probably going on here? And there's a wonderful condition where all of your internal organs are flipped. Right, imagine being that surgeon. I'm just going to go in here and wait. What? Just, hang on, which side's the heartbeat? Oh, flip him over. Right. Got this. Yeah. So still prepared for the unexpected, which means they've got a load of experience. They've seen lots and lots of unusual situations. Honestly, I'd rather not have surgery. If there's a non-surgical thing you can do, I'd go with that one. Yeah, and this is how we think about surgery. It's also how non-technical people think about software. I want my organization to be better, right? People don't want surgery, they want to be well. Organizations don't want software, they want the thing that software gives them. And they want that using the minimum possible software down to and including no software. Right? If I can achieve the same business impact with a tiny application or a big, big, big application, I'm going to go tiny. Yeah? There's a smaller surface area, there's less for me to fit in my head. In the same way that surgery is more than cutting, right? Thinking about surgery is more than cutting, it's study. Right? It's understanding the various systems in the body, the cardiovascular system, the nervous system, the respiratory system, the musculoskeletal system. There's lots of stuff, okay? There's tons of theory that's not just, oh, I need to go and do some book learning. It's genuinely, this impacts how someone's knee ligament works. And when they come in complaining of a pain in their lower right back, it could be a referred pain from something in their posture, which is their third vertebrae or something. You need to kind of know stuff to be able to connect those things up. Likewise, in an organization, we have this problem over here as a presenting symptom of an organizational dysfunction over here that was turned into software 15 years ago, which has now become a vestigial process that's causing this pain over here. Right? If I can't see how organizations work and I can't map that onto how software works, I can't help you be well. I can just do surgery. I can do cutting. And the problem is the relationship we have set up with our business stakeholders, is we've made them come to us and say, well, what I'd like is you to administer this many milliliters of this anesthetic, and then I want you to make an incision here. And they give you the laundry list of exactly how you're going to do that thing, right? And then what happens is if something unexpected happens, they go, well, it's your fault. I told you rather than a consultative relationship, which is this is where the pain is, this is what's hurting. Well, here are some options. We could do this thing, which is more expensive and higher risk, but has an awesome payoff, right? You'll be skiing by the weekend, yeah? We could do this thing, which is safer, there's a longer recovery period, it's less expensive. So what you're doing is you're translating into language I can consume the trade-offs. And so now I can make an educated decision with your help. That's what consultative means. Yeah. So they translate into English. They don't treat me like an idiot. Like mostly a surgeon will talk to you at the level you're at. If it's like die or don't die, they'll kind of have that conversation. If they know you're reasonably technical, they'll be reasonably technical. And also, you know, the metaphor is quite good because say you are on death's door, right? You're totally up for experimental surgery. If it's this or die, I'll take this. Yeah, because the odds are already stacked. In the same way, if an organization is in real trouble, or it's in that startup thing where everything's thrashing very quickly anyway, it's a very high risk of sudden death, yeah, it will try much more outrageous things. That works quite well. Its appetite for risk is very different. So surgery is more than cutting. Maybe software is more than features. And this is kind of where I wanted to get to. So we have features. Right? Features are the unit of delivery of software in any agile method. Okay? All the agile methods are about delivering features, throughput of features. You can have different sizes of features, which is then you start measuring feature points or story points or whatever your unit is. My favorite metric, my favorite set of sizings for features is on a set of cards by a guy called Pavel Brzezinski. And there's 3 cards for estimating. One card says 1. The second card says NFC, which stands for I really don't know. And the third one is TFB, which is too large to estimate. Okay? And those are the only 3 sizes. 1, no clue, too big. Okay? Because all features are size 1. And if you don't have a model where all features are size 1, go fix that. So features. Now that's my unit of delivery. That's my unit of walking around money. There is another kind of work, first-class work, which is discovery work. Discovery work is saying, is there a faster way up the mountain? Okay. Features assumes that it's a totally knowable and known problem, and I can slice it into its slices, and we're off and running, and that's all good. Mostly it isn't. Mostly software development is what's called a complex adaptive process, as I build part of a system, part of a computer system, I show it to people, I get feedback. That changes what I know, that changes what they know, that changes maybe what they want to get out of this. And so it creates options. And so now what I want is to be able to feed those options back into my system of work and do something different. Once we've got that locked-in list of backlog items, we don't get that option. So discovery is about this. It's about saying, are we nearly there yet? Right? Because mostly when we're planning and tracking and running agile projects, we go to our business stakeholders, and every sprint or whatever, we have our showcase, and they say, are we nearly there yet? And you say, 12 story points. They go, what? You go, 12 story points. They go, what does that mean? That's the thing we track. Okay, but are we nearly there yet? I can't answer that. I can just tell you how far we've been. Right? And so what we do is we've conditioned our business stakeholders who want to know what's the delta between here and done. That's all I care about. We don't have that. We stopped having that conversation a long time ago. We tell them where we've been. That's a useless metric. Right? How much fuel I've burnt is a useless metric. How far have we got to go? Don't know. I'm assuming it's this list of features because predictability, right? Discovery says, I am going to assume at any point I will make a breakthrough that will mean 2/3 of the work here is redundant and we can get the business impact with a fraction of the remaining work. That's pretty cool. If we're delivering frequently, getting stuff in front of people frequently, then often we create that option. I lost count of the number of times I worked at ThoughtWorks for 8 years. Fantastic company, really enjoyed working there. And many times we would be delivering something for a client, typically on the client site, and we'd be showing them stuff week after week because that's how we did things. And often maybe half or 2/3 of the way through, they'd say, stop. What? Well, we've got the thing we needed. Great. You know, we've got the thing we needed because we've seen it being developed and we've been able to steer it. We're done. We've got a bunch of money left and a bunch of smart people in the building. What about that? And they almost never went, and you can go now. They almost always went, we've got this other big pile of problems over here, can you help us? Right, it's a good way to build a relationship. And there was one client who will remain nameless, but they managed to paint themselves into a corner in terms of timing, and they sat down with the delivery lead, and they had this huge backlog of stuff, and between them, they locked themselves in a room for about a day, and they came out and they'd killed 2/3 of the list, and they said, that's actually our MVP. This was before the Eric Ries book came out, so we won't call it minimum viable product. But basically, if we deliver just this tiny amount of stuff, we will meet the business need that this whole project was about. And that was an enormously courageous act by the client, because mostly they were conditioned to go, but I'm paying for all these features, and I'm not going to get all these features. No, you're not. You're paying for an outcome. Okay, and if we can collaborate rather than negotiate the contract around that outcome, that would be kind of cool. And so then the third kind of work, which I think we don't measure as first-class work, is Kaizen. So Kaizen is, I take a broader definition of Kaizen. Kaizen from the Toyota Production System, from lean operations. Kaizen is continuous improvement. So it's small improvements to a system to make it better. But I think of Kaizen as changing the system of work. So things like, say I know we've got a load of work coming down the pipe. Simon's my expert in that work. I've only got one of him. Okay, so Simon takes me off for 2 weeks to train me up on this stuff. Okay, that takes both of us out for 2 weeks. At the end of that 2 weeks, we now have a different system of work. We have a system of work in which 2 people know that thing. When that work lands, we can consume it at not quite twice the rate, because Simon's really good at this and I'm only an amateur, but nearly twice the rate that we would have with just Simon. And he's not the bottleneck, and it means if he's ill, work doesn't stop, and all of those things. We change the system of work. So learning, training, coaching, teaching is all first-class work. It's Kaizen, changing the system of work to a more effective system. If I can get a bit ahead of my pipeline, if I can get 2-3 quarters out, and I can see the work that's coming down the pipe, and that work is substantively different from the stuff that I'm currently got, I'm going to need a different organization, because the one I've got is set up to deliver this kind of work. Yeah. So so Kaizen is how do I change the system of work, and like the obvious things are things like automation. Automating things is Kaizen. It means that something has become predictable, faster, less human intervention, less error prone, probably faster, right? Probably more resilient. I should be very careful about the things I automate, because I should only automate things that are a commodity like that. Anything where there is knowledge work involved is a really poor candidate for automation, People who build a build pipeline in iteration 0 or sprint 0 are massively missing a trick because they have no idea how their app's going to look yet. Right? Build things manually until it becomes boring, because once it's boring, it means you've done it enough times that it's boring, and it's been the same enough times that it's boring. Only then is it a candidate for automation. So I am totally guilty of this. I love automating stuff. Yeah. So just hold back from automating until you know it's a good candidate. So you end up with 3 different kinds of first-class work. And where I've been coaching teams recently, what I say to them is have different color cards, right? And so I can glance at the board and I can see what kinds of work is in flight. And my only rule is this: you're not allowed to have none of one of those. So the proportions are going to vary, but you can't have no Kaizen in flight. You can't have no discovery in flight, because that means that you've just stopped looking. And you can't have no features in flight, because that's your walking around money. So even very early on, when it's mostly discovery mode, you're still shipping something just to kind of get some early friends. So what? So what? So that's a great analogy, blah, thanks for that, Dan. So surgery, not civil engineering. So what? So what that means is we need to re-engage. Okay, we need to rethink some of the ways we do this. We need to re-engage with business stakeholders. Okay, we need to co-create a relationship based around consultative, advising, providing options, coaching them through making decisions about trade-offs. Okay, we need to reset that. We've got 40 years of history telling them we're not very good at this. Okay, it's on us. It's on us to fix this. Yeah. I don't know if anyone else noticed, but a beer just appeared magically on the side of the stage. You see? That's Kaizen, right? I now have a slightly improved system of work. I have one with beer in it. Thank you very much, beer person. So business stakeholders, we need to re-engage. It's on us, right? They have every reason to believe we're a bunch of jokers, because most of you have been a bunch of jokers. Yeah? We need to re-engage with our management. What does it mean to manage in a system where we are surgeons, where we want the minimal amount of software for the largest business impact? What are my metrics? What am I tracking? What does good look like? Yeah? We need to start answering that ourselves, and then we need to start educating upwards and outwards into the organization. We also need to re-engage with ourselves, right? We need to think about Jessica Kerr, who's one of my favorite people. I did a talk with her about this sort of stuff. And she's Jessitron on the Twitter. She's totally worth following on Twitter. Brilliant programmer. She said, she's talking about surgery. And I said, how would you describe what I'm trying to say about surgery? And she said, well, it's like this. She said, it's more about physiology and less about scissors. I went, yeah, that, right? So in terms of us being software developers, it's more about physiology, less about scissors, right? It's more about understanding what it is we're building, how we're building. Who knows more than 2 different models for modeling concurrency? For the record, no hands went up. Okay, everyone in this room is currently working on a multi-core computer, right? Using languages that support concurrency as first-class constructs. And most of us have never got past, threads. Thread.new or new thread, depending on which language you're using, right? There's, I'm not going to rattle them off, but at least half a dozen. A process-oriented language like Erlang, an actor language. If you don't have those things in your back pocket, you're limiting yourself because you don't know, your brain doesn't know how to reason using those paradigms. So when you see an unfamiliar problem, you go, oh, Python, because that's the thing you know. Or Java. I'm going to Java this because it's Java. And so you go and you Java the crap out of it, right? It was nothing to do. And then someone else comes along who's like more their kind of F-sharp sort of OCaml functional program, and they go, but it's just get some data, transform it, and emit some data. And you go, damn it, I had this massive class hierarchy over here because OO, yeah? So understand, giving ourselves new tools, giving ourselves new options. Go and read up on physiology, on software physiology. What does it mean to have those options available to you? We need to rethink our delivery model. Kaizen, features, discovery are all first-class work. We track them, measure them, okay, the same. Schedule each, measure each, track each, showcase each. So features is the heart. Well, features is easy to showcase. Here I made you a thing, right? Discovery, here's what I learned. Here's some information that's going to inform a decision, or here's a set of options, and here are the trade-offs for those options. Kaizen is the easiest one to measure of all because you do it using the scientific method. It's a falsifiable hypothesis. You baseline it, plan, do, check, adjust, right? So all three of these can be demonstrated, all three of these can be scheduled, all three of these can be showcased. And again, always some of them in flight. Okay, you never have none, you never have no Kaizen going on, you never have no discovery going on. Okay? So it means we need to set a new direction. We want to get beyond software engineering, towards maybe software surgery. Okay? It'd be quite nice if that phrase caught on. Beyond programming, towards business impact. Your job isn't programming, your job is impacting a business for the better. Okay? Collaborating with other people in order to achieve that. We need to get beyond cutting towards curing. Right? I want to get beyond the stuff I do towards the impact of the stuff I do, the reason for the stuff I do. We need to get beyond features. Thank you. And now I'm going to drink a beer. I don't know how we're doing for timing. He says, looking at timing, dude.
We've got plenty of time for questions and answers.
Oh, cool. Got plenty of time for questions. I do really long rambling answers, so I apologise in advance.
Before we start with the questions, after this, we're going to do a podcast thing. And so if you want to volunteer your question afterwards to ask Dan for a podcast, then that would be awesome. So if you do that afterwards, just go and see Charlie or Dean over there, who's waving his hand. That would be great. So let the questions begin.
So I'm going to start there because that hand shot up straight away. Come on.
Can we go back to the previous slide, please?
Can we go back? I don't know. Let's see how this works. This one?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, these slides are all up on SpeakerDeck. So if you go to speakerdeck.com/Tastapod, all my decks are up there. So you can please go ahead and get those. Maria.
Recommendation on collaborating with an agile team offshore. Because from my experience, talking, in conference is really difficult. And for me, the whole heart of agile is to use Kanban boards and to collaborate
Yeah.
and to be there together. What do you think?
Fantastic. So that's Maria. So great question. So what's my thoughts on collaborating with teams? Yeah, with collaborating with teams offshore. And because Agile's about collaboration and close communication and being on conference calls and dialed in sucks and things. And so I've heard people, quite well-known Agile people, say, oh, unless you're co-located, it will fail. Yeah, unless X, it will fail. I don't believe that. For any value of X. It's basically any of those things just become a constraint. So when I have a distributed team, it's a constraint. One of the most successful large-scale Agile projects I've been involved with, again, happened at ThoughtWorks about 10 years ago now, where they took, it was a well-known high street electronics firm, and they basically lifted the whole organization and rebuilt everything underneath it. So this was from touchscreen, EPOS tills in the stores, through to stock control, purchasing, warehouse, all of it. They rebuilt the whole organization in an insanely short amount of time. They did it with 10 teams of about 8 to 10 people in 5 offices in 3 time zones in 3 continents. Okay, so there's two in the States, 2 in the UK, and 1 in India, I believe. And the model they had was a follow the sun model. So in the morning in London, in the UK, they'd hand over from India. In the afternoon in India, in the UK, they'd hand over to the States. In the afternoon in the States, they'd hand over to India's morning, and so on. So you had these, each location had 2 distributed stand-ups each day. They had a single code base, single build, okay, and the whole thing was run like a military operation. A guy called Dave Wally, who's now ThoughtWorks COO, very, very good project lead. And most of the analysts spent most of their time in planes, right? Because the way you move information around is inside people. And anyway, it worked. And it worked brilliantly. It was a really tough gig, but some of the things they did, they made each location was fully autonomous. So it wasn't like development happens here and testing happens here and analysis is onshore. It was you team in India, you've got sales order processing. You own that. You guys in London, you've got stores, okay? And so you had full autonomy over the piece you were doing. So very high trust and so things like that, you can, there's ways of slicing the work that make it sympathetic to different regions. I'm not a fan, I'm a vocal opponent of having like testing here and programming here and whatever else, something else out in Bratislava or whatever. I think that is guaranteed to create unnecessary handoffs, and you're basically back where you were in the 80s. So don't do that, if you can possibly avoid it. There's a lovely principle that Google uses, or parts of Google certainly, one of my ex-Googler buddies. What they used to do is when they had distributed teams, the rule was if anyone dials in, everyone dials in, which I thought was rather brilliant. If anyone dials in, everyone dials in. So even if like half the team's co-located, you still all put on a headset and get onto a conference call, because now you're all having the same experience. And so everyone is aware that someone else might be talking across them or whatever. So it's not like, you know, a couple of guys out in Pune and then the rest of the team's here and they're on a squawk box, because that sucks to be them, right? And there's lots of non-verbal communication going on here that they can't be part of. So either like spend a bunch of dollars on telepresence, so that stuff's so cheap nowadays, or comparatively, it's not expensive to have decent telepresence. Tech solves a lot of this. It makes the world a lot smaller. Where you can't do that, make it a completely level playing field. So if we've got anyone dialing in, everyone's dialing in, and that's just one of my favorite principles. And then everyone in the team solves things like shared whiteboards, online whiteboards. You suddenly switch from your physical Kanban board to a Trello because it's just easier. And of course it's not the same as moving physical cards around, but everyone now is having the same experience. And it's the meta message is to the remote guys, we respect you. And that's a huge thing for those guys to hear, because mostly it's you're offshore and you don't count. Yeah? And they can't help hearing that because we're all having a first-class meeting here and they're on the phone.
Why would the analysts have to fly out though if it's all located?
Oh, no. When it was co-located, when it's co-located, that works a lot better. No, we had analysts in planes because there was so much of the communication needed to go across. There was a lot of communication needed to go across team. So the way business processes work necessarily in a big retail, like you can slice the functional areas, but there's still a huge amount of business information, if you like, that needs to be clearly communicated across those things, is what we found.
In meetings rather than emails?
You can do both, but there's an awful lot of stuff that someone happens to have in their head that they didn't realize they had in their head until someone asks. Yeah. Cool. I told you I did wrong way. I know I'm really passionate about the remote working thing. It totally works. You can make it work. It's of course it's never going to be as high fidelity as being co-located, but don't let anyone tell you you can't do it. Yeah.
So you mentioned in one of the previous slides using the surgery as an example that
Yes.
you want a well-practiced person doing a procedure they've done hundreds of times by the time they come to operate with you. How does that fit in with the inherent need of engineers wanting to do some cool shit instead? Like this is new framework they want to try out, but we've never done it before. But if we don't ask or try and do it at some point, we're never going to get an opportunity to. So I wonder how does that? Like, 'cause I like the metaphor. The metaphor's really good. I was wondering how that bit fits into it. It's like exploratory surgery, I guess. But how do you get someone to sign up to that?
So the question is, how do you get someone to sign up to like exploratory surgery, as it were? Yeah. So we're meeting the need of, experimental, yeah. Meeting the need of developers who like to try out new cool stuff, matching that with the desire of the business stakeholders to have people using well-trodden paths. I think there's a couple of things there. One is I think they're both completely compatible. And in fact, much more so in software, because mostly in software, if you screw it up, no one dies. So there's a couple of things. One is in terms of the see one, do one, teach one. Pairing up junior developers with more experienced developers, I think is, or novice developers with more experienced developers, I think is a hugely powerful way to transfer that knowledge. And then a lot of it, again, so the discovery work, so features is the actual operation, right? Is actually doing the work, yeah? Delivering those features. I want some discovery work. Remember, you've got continually non-zero discovery work going on there, yeah? that discovery work is things like new frameworks, because I want to continually be creating options. I'm not necessarily using that to build something I'm going to ship. I'm using that to create one of several options that says, if I want to hack something together really quickly, I can use Node.js. If I care about what happens to things like, I don't know, exceptions, I probably shouldn't, right? And so if I want something a bit more robust, I could use Node.js to learn to practice my evented chops, and then I go and use Vertex or something a bit more grown up to do it for real. But so I'm a huge fan of trying these things out, but make it explicit. This is some work, some first-class work, where we're going to go and try this thing out. And the result of that first-class work is more options in our arsenal of options, and better engagement from the team, because people like trying stuff out, right? Why not? And also a broader mind when it comes to seeing unfamiliar problems, going, look, that looks like an aspect of this thing over here that I looked at. There's one of the things I'm seeing, and it's surprising the things that connect up. So I'm seeing more and more when you look at microservice implementations, as they start getting into, I've got lots of these microservices, now I need to do things like alerting and monitoring and whatever, they start to build a really crappy version of Erlang. Right? You only know that if you know what a good version of Erlang looks like, i.e. Erlang, right? So, so different technologies kind of inform different design styles, because I know enough Erlang to be dangerous, right, about that much. But what it means is when I'm thinking about those kind of message passing systems and resilient systems, I've got a mental model at my disposal that otherwise I would have to figure out, from first principles. So go play, but be very explicit about what's play versus what's features.
And you've been saying that, I kind of realised that there's that element when surgeons, well-experienced surgeons want to try something new, they go and practice in the lab, which is like and then they eventually will go and try it on a test patient.
They'll try it in lab. They'll try it. So an awful lot of cutting by surgeons is done on pigs. It's done on dead animals. Yeah, and it turns out that dead animals have skin texture the same as people. And then you have cadavers. So a lot of people leave their body to surgery. Most of that surgery isn't glamorous. Most of that is junior doctors hacking away at people, right? And they're doing it to practice. They're doing it so that when it comes to a real live human being, then they've done that. They know what that feels like, and they know what wrong feels like. They're like, wait, there's something tugging there that shouldn't be tugging. Hey, what do you think? Oh, right, yeah, there we go. Good spot. Yeah. So. 3 hands went up simultaneously. Let's go there.
You talked about how agile methodologies optimize for predictability.
Yes.
And noted down like story points, burn down, things like that. Do you see those as compatible with the 3 things that you're proposing that we kind of focus on, which is features, discovery, and timing? Or do you see problems with that?
It's great. I see problems with it. Is the short answer. So the question is, do I see things like velocity burn up, burn down, that type of predictability compatible with this surgery metaphor? Mostly no. However, I do find that this type of approach gives me more predictability, more confidence, more certainty around hitting dates for scope, weirdly. And the way I do that is I talk about outcomes, and this is what I discuss with my patient, right, with my client, is we need to move this dial in this way. And that's what we need to do. We don't need to build this software. We need to move this dial in this way. Yeah. And so now there's loads of ways we could do that. So I advocate a model called Blink Estimation. It's one of the few things I've blogged. So if you look up Blink Estimation, there's an article on it. And essentially, it's a deliberate nod to Malcolm Gladwell, Blink. It's that if you get experienced delivery people, and it requires you to be experienced, and it's not an elitist thing, it's a having seen lots of this stuff before thing. So you go, well, this is unfamiliar, but it's between that and that, right? It's the pragmatic programmers have a lovely phrase in their book. They say it's bigger than a bread box and smaller than a house. Yeah, that's about right. That's about the order of magnitude. If the thing if I can't even afford a bread box, I shouldn't start. If I can easily afford a house, then it doesn't matter where it is on that scale. It's only when my appetite is somewhere between breadbox and house that scale even matters. Yeah. So I agree, and essentially what you're doing is you're agreeing with your stakeholders how much they want to invest to get some kind of return. So it's sort of ROI, but it's not quite ROI. It's a thing called risk-adjusted ROI, which is a slightly different thing. But because that involves things like interim releases and stuff like that. So what I'll do is I'll have an investment conversation that says, how much do you want to spend on this? Because they say, I want a car. And you say, what kind of car? So, I don't know, a nice one. You say, okay, do you want to spend £500 on a car, or do you want to spend £50,000 on a car? Because you're going to get two very different cars, right? There is such a thing as a £500 car. There is such a thing as a £50,000 car. I can spend as much as you want, right? And you should get increasing value, yeah? However, what's your appetite? What do you want to spend on this? And they say, I want to spend that much. You say, right, now, there's a lovely chap called Todd Little who developed a model called rolling wave planning. And rolling wave planning says we agree the big boulder items, we agree what the goal is, and we agree roughly a timeline, and then we just start breaking off pieces of that work in order of uncertainty based on my three types of work. I take off work in order of uncertainty so that I'm delivering against features, I'm delivering against discovery, and I'm delivering against Kaizen. And my tracking every week is always looking forward rather than backward. So each week or each fortnight, whenever I do my planning sessions, isn't how many story points and what's our velocity and what's our projected blah. It's this. Last time we met, you thought we could deliver this stuff in this timeline. Yes. Has anything happened in the last 2 weeks, or whatever it is, that will materially affect that? Because that's the only thing that matters, right? And that translates, when you translate it down to 5-year-old languages, are we nearly there yet? Right? That's the only thing that matters. So I'm continually doing work week after week after week to try to disprove the hypothesis that we can land this thing. We only started because we believe we can land this thing. Every week I should be doing some work, and that's the discovery work. I should be doing some work to either increase my confidence that we can land this thing in the time remaining, or that we should do something different because I've just discovered a massive hole in it. Yeah, so the idea is we're looking forward and we're trying to find gaps. We're not looking backwards and assuming that the fuel burnt is any indicator of future performance. So it shifts the conversation around, and I find it's a much more honest conversation. So, yeah, great question. That might be my favourite question.
You finished with the slide deck, I might turn it off so we've got the light.
Ah, yeah. I could do that. How do I turn the projector off? Okay, so now I've got blue. There we go, we're going with blue.
You talked about more physiology and less surgery.
Yes.
At the same time, you talked about we want to get really good at using the right tools to better solve the problem. But not all of those tools are going to be software. And I felt you didn't really cover the non-software ways of doing the physiology.
So I didn't cover the non-software ways of doing the physiology. It's a lovely observation. So let's see, non-software ways of doing physiology. Well, things like it may be, well, so in organisational terms, here's an example. So Simon does some work and he produces some information, and Charlie uses that information in her work. Okay, so if she has access to that information, she can make decisions, and those are better decisions than if she doesn't have that information. So she says it would be really useful if I had access to that information. So I think, okay, well, one option is we're going to implement SAP, right? 15 million quid, 2 years, new data center. Here's your information, right? Okay, that's one option. Option two is Shireen is going to write me a small web app, and it's going to basically make that piece of information available. And in fact, because she's smart, she says, well, what do you actually use it for? And Charlie says, well, what I do is I take that number and I put it into that system over there. And Shireen says, well, why don't I just take that number and put it into that system for you? She says, oh, thank you very much. Right? Tiny little bit of code. Yeah. Third option is this, is we lift Simon up and we go and move him to sit next to Charlie. So that's an org change, right? And now that means that Charlie can just lean across whenever she needs that information. Yeah? And while she's doing it, she notices there's loads of other information that Simon happens to generate that she also finds useful. And so that org change has actually ended up with some serendipitous benefits. Now, there's trade-offs, right? So Simon was sitting there. Was he sitting there because there was a spare seat there? Or was he sitting there because he used to work really closely with Michael? And now I've introduced distance, right? So I've got to understand what the trade-offs are. But so you might have organizational changes, process changes, double loop learning, because of Chris Argyris, double loop learning. So single loop learning is, can I make my process better? Double loop learning is panning back and going, is this even the right process? What's the benefit of this thing, and can I achieve that benefit some other way? So there's lots of non-software ways of even engaging with the problem, let alone starting to solve it.
But in an audience that is heavily tech-oriented,
Yes.
there are alternatives.
And this is the thing. So I see your technical ability as a set of options that you carry around in your back pocket, right? And so that means when you find a novel problem, because all the good ones are novel, right? When you come and find a novel problem, you're like, I could apply this or this or this. The obvious solution would be this. Yeah. However, if we just reframe the problem slightly as this, and one of my buddies, who's like the best programmer I know, I've spent the last 15 years of my life trying to model what he does and explain it to people. Turns out you can build a career doing that. And his gift is this. Or I say gift because that's not fair, because he works very, very hard at this. It's not a magical thing he has. So he works very, very hard at this. He sees a problem, and I see the same problem, and he does this. He looks at this problem and he goes, it's basically that, isn't it? And I go, damn it. And he goes, because it's that, we can just make it go away with some software or with some whatever it is. I'm busy trying to carve up this thing, and I think I'm quite good at this, and I still really struggle carving up this thing. And he looks at it and he goes, yeah, it's that, isn't it? Damn it, he's done it again. And there is a huge amount to be said for thinking that everything you learn in terms of tech is just honing that one core skill of simplicity. What's the simplest thing I can do here that would achieve that outcome? Right? And if you can identify that simplicity and solve for that, everything falls away. It's delightful when it happens. I still suck at it, but I'm getting better. I'm practicing. Gote?
So I love the metaphor, and I like that addition about clinical trials, which is added on to what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole load of people who you present a choice to and say, we could do A, we could do B. But the bit I'm struggling with is the NHS have done this. They've introduced patient choice.
Yep.
There's a whole group of people remaining who go, well, I heard choice A and B. What do you think, doctor? And how do you deal with that group who just go, I don't want to take the accountability on you to make decisions?
So that's fine. So great question. So the question is, and I'm bringing it back to real stuff. So NHS has this thing called patient choice. It's not patient choice. It's not. It's a lie. It's a spin. But anyway, that's the thing that they'd like to think is called patient choice. And the idea is that they say to patients, what do you think we should do here? And the patient says, I have no surgical or medical training. I've got no idea. You decide, right? And the answer then is decide. But don't decide and go, aha, I shall go off and restrict my beard, and I shall decide for you. You just say, well, in your case, given these are the factors, this is the decision I'd make, and this is why. So now two things happen. One is we got a decision. Two is I felt consulted. I feel like I'm part of that solution. I'm like, right, I can see how you did that. It's not magic. It's, well, okay, in your situation, this thing, happens in dentistry all the time. We could put a white amalgam on or the crappy silver-coloured one. It's your back to, no one's ever going to see. Really, you don't need to pay triple for this, silly filling. It's like, okay. Or you can have this really, really expensive thing. I changed dentists because I realised that the dentist I was with wasn't so much trying to care about my oral hygiene or oral well-being as transfer money from my world into his world via dentistry. And I was like, wait a minute. And I did that I was going to go and ask someone else. And the someone else of much higher integrity said, well, actually, no, you're all fine. I was like, really? Because the other guy was saying, I need to rip half my mouth out. He goes, no, it's all fine. I would keep an eye on this and this and this. I'm like, I think you're great. He made not a bean out of that visit, or 30 quid for a checkup or whatever. Yeah, he has my lifelong business and my lifelong loyalty. Right? I trust him. He knows what he's talking about. He's a man of clearly high integrity, and he really cares about his patients. And you talk to his other patients, and they're like, oh, he's amazing. Been with him for 20 years. And it's wonderful. So, and this is what I mean about re-engaging. Right? It's on us to start again at not even zero, below zero, and re-establish our credentials as a trusted advisor. I wouldn't buy widgets off me, right, of us in our industry. We are a bunch of career shysters. We've been systemically lying to business stakeholders for the last 40 years. When will it be done? I could not possibly know it's a complex adaptive system. I'm going to pretend I can apply civil engineering theory to it and do that, right? Because Gantt charts, yeah? And you look at, I know, all of the gorgeous like Waltzing with Bears and People Wear and all these mythical man month. It's not like we haven't known for 40 years, right, that we were totally making this up. And even some of us have tried to fess up. And the rest of us are going, shut up. There's good money to be made here. Right? I built a tool. Right? Microsoft Project on it says, do not use this for software projects. True story. It says, you know, if you're planning a party or building a house or whatever, yeah, go nuts. We do not advise using Microsoft Project for software projects, said Microsoft many, many years ago. I'm like, you know, they know, right? They wouldn't use Microsoft Project to run projects. Apparently, it's the third most popular. Oh, God. Why are we doing this to ourselves? Yeah. One more question. Go on.
Related to their questions, I really like the new paradigm, especially since both my friends are doctors and I use some of that stuff as well. But I have some issues with it because one thing that we take for granted is something that doctors would love, the ability to experiment without there being any major negative consequences is something that, oh yeah, what happens if I move this here? That's like, oh no, you probably die. But if the software dies in that case, we just lose some money. And I feel like we should take some of the stuff. I really like the mantra, but not focus so much on the risk aversion that most doctors and surgeons need to focus on.
So
A lot of the money that's being made in medical software now is giving them the tools to do what we do, like practice virtual operations and virtual medicine. And oh yeah, what happens if I give you this? Will you die or won't you die?
I could just hang out and talk to you for hours about this. So I'm going to try and sum up what you said. I'm going to do a really bad job of it. So both your parents are medical, which is awesome, and one of the major flaws in this metaphor is the risk function. Effectively, is that if I stuff up doing some software, the likely impact is much, much lower than if I stuff up doing some surgery. That's true for many, many classes of software and a lot of classes of surgery. For instance, a lot of surgical things that don't go well are just like, I don't know, someone doing ugly stitching or something that could have been better stitching. It's just poor practice or amateurish or whatever else. In terms of actual interventions, the way that the theatres are set up, operating theatres are set up, is everyone's monitoring everyone. You know this. In the last few years, they introduced the idea of checklists, and really simple things like checklists. The number of swabs coming out of the theatre is the same as the number of swabs that went in the theatre, which means that your car keys aren't in the patient, right? There are, I know someone who was involved in the piece of work that led to these checklists, and he is under NDA of the number of pieces of surgical kit that got left in people because it's embarrassingly high. So we have an enormous opportunity as software people. And again, the ability to play, the ability to practice, the ability to do discovery work in a non-life-threatening way. And live. And I can measure things. So for instance, it's unethical typically to do A/B testing right, at scale on a particular surgical intervention. 2% of people, we're not going to bother doing that bit. But clinical trials work that way, but usually with everyone's aware. They're aware they're participating in a double-blind randomized clinical trial, right? That's how they work. Or they're students and they're a bit hard up and they'll just take any old drugs. So definitely the curve changes. But I think the principle's there. But again, understanding, I would just say understanding it is it's a huge opportunity for us. It's a huge advantage for us that we can riff on this stuff, we can iterate on this stuff, we can experiment with this stuff, much, much lower likelihood of killing people, of bad things happening. You're completely right. Fab. I think we should probably wrap up. Cool. Thank you very much.